I am. I am on. Yes, indeed. Hey, a few years ago, actually a number of years ago, Boulevard for several years offered a class, a support group type study called Divorce Care. And it was a 12-week course, and it was there to help people from our community and church who were going through or had gone through separation or divorce care or divorce, and it was to help them kind of process the hurt, the rejection, all those kind of things. And it was amazing to watch people's lives be changed. For several years, down the hall from there, we actually offered a group called DC4K. Some of you may remember that. Maybe your children have gone through it. It was divorce care for kids. And divorce care for kids kind of went along with the adult divorce care. It was also 12 weeks. And through a series of videos and through drama and through drawing and coloring and puppets and sharing, kids were led through some of the issues that children go through when their family goes through separation and divorce. Very, very helpful. One of the most effective and simple actually methods that they used with the kids was simply this, that when the child would come into the room on any given DC4K night, they would come into the room, there was a laminated poster up on the wall, and on that laminated poster were all kinds of faces, sad faces, happy faces, depressed faces, anxious faces, angry faces, and the child was instructed to draw maybe a circle or put their name next to the face that represented how they were feeling that particular day or week. It was actually magical. It was great for two reasons. One, because it helped the child identify actually what they were feeling, and two, it helped the teacher understand kind of where that child was that day so they could know how to care for them. You know, as a person who facilitated our divorce care group for a number of years myself, I found myself sometimes wishing that divorce care had put that same laminated poster, because there's a lot of times my adults came in and I didn't know where they were that day, and a lot of times I don't think that they had really put their finger on what they were particular feeling or what emotion they had in their heart as they came into divorce care that night. So hey, what we're going to do is I'm just going to give you guys a chance. If you all have the Boulevard app, I'd like you to pull it out, okay, real quickly, okay? Pull up the Boulevard app. When you pull up the Boulevard app, there should be a place that says in-service poll. Do you see that? Okay. Mine has to reload. All right. Is that working for everybody? Okay. And when you pull that up, there should be a series of 4 faces. All right. We have our sad face. We have our worried face. We have our happy face. We have our peaceful face. I'd like you to push the one, okay, and vote for the one that basically most represents, identifies how you are feeling like this week or today even. I realized we couldn't have 27 faces. I had to settle for 4. Look at you. Look at you. And the numbers, they are changing. Okay. Keep coming. Keep coming. We had people that first service at nigh on took about 37 minutes. I realized I should have put an indecisive face up there. Okay, we're coming in. Anybody hadn't voted, still waiting? How do I feel? Some of you are pinching. I feel fine. I feel really, never mind. Okay, sad, all right, sad, a little bit higher percentage. Oh, still changing on me. Okay, I think we are 5.8 sad first service. Still coming in. My goodness. Still coming in. Here we go. Okay. Very good. 10% of you have feel like some sense kind of a sadness. No, 8.3. Seriously, I would like to speak today also, but you guys are having a great time with this, so that's good. This is great. I'm feeling confused. Worried, all right. Close to 20%. Happy, all right. About a third of you feel a high measure of happiness and peaceful. 40, great for you. That's great, all right. That's fun. Nice to know where you're at today, okay. I think it's important. I mean, I know I read this book this week, and we're reading it in this men's D group, and it's talking about giving too much too much value to how we're feeling and our emotions. And I get that, and sometimes in our culture, I know that we've probably swung the pendulum, but I personally, maybe it's because I'm kind of an emotionally driven person. Okay, I'm a lot emotionally driven person, all right? But my phone is still buzzing. Oh, the pharmacy has my medication ready. I'll be back in just a moment. Some of you can decide how you're feeling while I'm gone. Sorry, I am way off my notes right now. I think it's important. Not that we're driven by our emotions. I do believe they are given by God, and I think that it's important that we, on any given day, kind of can put a finger on how we are feeling, to identify maybe a particular emotion or feeling that is going on, because we know that is important, that we make sometimes our behavior, it comes out of those. And so if we can identify what we might call as the why, I think good things happen. So we've been talking for about 10 weeks. This is the last sermon in a series that we have on David. And I would tell you, I've probably said this before, I like David. And when I read about the life of David, when I read his Psalms, when I read 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, story of David's life, here's the word that comes to mind. The word is real. I like David because he's real. And he's not afraid of being seen as real. And I think that you and I want to follow someone and see someone's life, especially in this book, that we feel like is real. And David is that. I love biographies. I love reading the history of people. That's something, whether it be Moses' life or Abraham's life, those are some of my favorite passages in the scriptures. I like reading biographies outside biblical content. I read part of a biography on Teddy Roosevelt a couple years ago, and I started it. Honestly, I didn't finish the book. Here's why: because it was called An Intimate Look at the Life of Teddy Roosevelt. And I realized about a third of the way through the book, I don't think this guy ever met Teddy Roosevelt. And I don't think that you can provide an intimate look for me if you have never met the man. I think he just read a lot of books and read a lot of paper on Teddy Roosevelt. And the second thing that really bothered me on the bio while we're talking about this, okay, I'm feeling a little frustrated. The second thing that really bothered me was this, is Teddy Roosevelt, in this guy's eyes, could do no wrong. And even if he did wrong, this guy somehow had a way of turning this kind of thing and making it like, well, it wasn't the best decision, but he did it out of a good heart, or his motives were right. And I was like, come on, give me the highs and lows, give me the ins and outs, give me the days that Teddy's stupid, and then give me the days that Teddy makes some great decisions that change the course of our nation. But I want it both. And that's one of the reasons I like David. Because David is real. And sometimes in biographies, what you see is towards the end of someone's life, a bio is always like wants them to go out in a blaze of glory. Like, okay, we're just going to turn it up to he's almost going to become divine, almost superhuman. And it's but not David. Matter of fact, when we come to the end of David's life in 2 Samuel, and again, this is the last sermon in this series, so we've looked at David's life, we've seen his ups and downs. He's had some real highs, he's had some real lows. He's allowed the writer and his own writings have been honest about all those things. And we come down to the end of his life in 2 Samuel 22, or even the chapters preceding in 18, 19, 20. Let me just give you a 1-minute roller coaster of this guy's, the last years of his life. There's a coup against David's kingdom, a takeover against his kingdom, or at least an attempted one. You know who it is? Are you aware of the story? It's his own son, Absalom, who it says is incredibly dashing and handsome and charming. His own son attempts to take aggressively, in a hostile way, the kingdom from his godly father. Doesn't end there. The army goes out and pursues Absalom, and Absalom, his son, is killed violently. Is that a good thing? I mean, if we're talking about emotions, how do you feel as a dad? This is your son who you love. He's trying to kill you and take over your kingdom. Now he is killed. But you know who he's killed by? He's killed by David's best friend and commander of his army, Joab. So now the son who you love, who was in the coup, is now killed, and he's killed by your best friend. And so David is grieving the loss of his son, and Joab comes to him and says, hey, why are you grieving? Your men have been out there laying their life on the line. You should be celebrating and encourage them. How do you feel on that day, on this roller coaster? Just a chapter or two later, there's a man who actually betrayed David, a man that David thought was his friend. And David has to figure out, amidst this betrayal, whether he is going to send this man away or have him executed or actually invite him into his table. Those aren't easy days, are they? What face do you put on that day? And there's another story, of a person who he thought betrayed him, but actually didn't betray him. He was lied about, and so he has to decide what he's going to do with that person. I'm telling you, the last years of his life, as were the previous, were up and down a roller coaster. They are real, and that is why this is a man. This is a man who we are told about him is a man after God's own heart. And we hear that phrase, folks, and it seems like it makes it so far away from most of us. I just cannot be that person. But David makes it doable. He makes it doable. First, he makes it doable because he's honest and vulnerable. And although he is a mighty warrior, and although he is the king of Israel, he writes songs that consistently show his vulnerability to his people and his kingdom. They are singing about these things about their king, these weaknesses, these dark times. You don't see too many kings doing that. You don't see too many warriors, too many commanders having that type of vulnerability. And second, the thing that makes this doable because of David is the fact that when he gets in these situations, he's not perfect, but it's so often what he does. So we look at 2 Samuel 22, and 2 Samuel 22 is actually what we find is a psalm, a song. He's got a whole bunch of other psalms, but this particular song makes its way into the end of his life, 2 Samuel chapter 22. It's amazing. It's written, I would say, kind of in two movements. Okay, the first movement is actually a movement of what I'm going to call weakness. It's a movement of him being overwhelmed. I want to read that to you in just a second. The second movement is this movement of him being victorious and all the things that come to him. It's unusual in the fact that it sways in the roller coaster from very low to very, very high. Kind of reminds me of Paul McCartney's songs. I'm always amazed when McCartney, the older folks know him as, originally with the Beatles, but this guy's had this long-term musical life. And I just saw a concert here recently, on YouTube, and I was amazed at the youthfulness, how many people were bringing their 9 and 10 and 11-year-old kids to listen to this guy. His music just keeps going, not as long as David's. But in McCartney's music, there's so many times that he has like these 2 or 3 different movements of being the like strings and soft and tender moment, and all of a sudden it's just pumping and there's just rock and roll coming out, and then he drops to something else and he changes tempo and he changes keys, and it's just amazing what McCartney can do. Amazing what David writes. So let's look at these 2 movements real quickly. Out of them come 2 questions. It's very simple message I have for you today. 2 primary questions, really. Here comes the first one. Out of 2 Samuel 22, verses 5 and 6, the waves of death overwhelmed me, floods of destruction swept over me, the grave wrapped its ropes around me, and death laid a trap in my path. Folks, I'm going to tell you, look at that. Look at that hard. That's not I had a flat tire on the way home. That's not the toaster burnt the bread. This is real stuff. Whatever you are going through, whatever is happening in your life, whatever you feel like is really, really bad, this is something that can make you say, I can relate to that. That's where I am. That's where I feel. 2 Samuel 22, later in the same song, second movement. He says this, you gave me victory over my accusers. What? In the middle of death overwhelmed me and floods of destruction swept over me? Yeah. He moves to, you gave me victory over my accusers. You preserved me as the ruler over nations. People I don't even know now serve me. You give great victories to your king. You show unfailing love to your anointed, to David and all his descendants forever. Two incredible movements, very contrasting. As high and low and low and high as you could possibly imagine. From death was around me to you gave me the victory over my enemies. Incredible movements. The path, my friends, the path to becoming a child after the Father's heart is found in this song. What do I do when I am weak? And what do I do when I am strong? Being a person who is after the heart of God doesn't have to be complicated. It comes down to decision making. Day by day, we put our happy face or our sad face, our depressed face, our overwhelmed face, our elated face, our celebrated face, whatever it is, we do that, and we have to decide in that, I won't be driven by my emotions. What will I do? What will I do when I'm overwhelmed? What will I do on the worst day? And what will I do on my best? So what face did you choose this morning? That's the question we have to ask. Well, 10% of you felt a little sadness. Almost half of you felt, or a third of you felt very, very happy. About 40%, almost half felt very, very peaceful. And those are wonderful things. Hope you're being honest with it. What do we do? What do you do when you feel fear? What do you do when, as a single mom or any mom, when you're just overwhelmed? Dawn and I have had 3 of our grandkids for the last couple days. Last night at 8 o'clock, we were watching a cartoon, and I'm just falling asleep. I mean, like, poof, on the couch, just falling over. I'm just thinking, all we did was just play all day long, which is fun. You know, I was feeling tired. So what are you feeling? And what do you do when you are weak? And what effect does that have on your life? What happens when you're angry? What happens when you are disappointed because someone didn't come through, or someone betrayed you, or someone lied, someone did not keep their promise? What is your first go-to? Sometimes when we feel that way, it affects our communication with God, doesn't it? I mean, there's a part of us that we can talk about God's love and God's peace and God's faithfulness and all those things, but there's a part of so many of us that when we're not on our game spiritually, or when we're underneath our game emotionally, it just kind of makes us feel like we really, God doesn't really want to talk with me unless I'm kind of on my game, unless I'm feeling strong. Have you felt that way, or is that just me? And I have to talk my way through that, and I have to read these songs of David. Here's David's response. The waves of death overwhelmed me, floods of destruction swept over me, the grave wrapped its robe around me, death laid a trap on my path. Here's where he goes. I called on the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and he saved me from my enemies. Listen to this. In my distress, I cried out to the Lord. Yes, I cried to my God for help. He heard me from his sanctuary. My cry reached his ears. Just a couple things I want you to see there. He called on God because God alone is worthy of praise. He's not praising God here. He's just crying out. But he recognized God is the one to go to in these times. Second of all, I love this. But in my distress, I cried out to the Lord. Yes, I cried out to the Lord. It's like he says, I cried out to the Lord, and he's almost recognizes, anticipates someone in his kingdom, some peasant going, you did what? You did what? He says, yes, I cried out to the Lord. And he doesn't just call, although he does that, he cries out. There's a distressfulness in his voice. Are you honest enough with God to cry out to him with distress in your voice? A loved and nurtured and cared for child will go past just calling to a father. They will cry out. They will cry out to a father. They will shed tears before the Father. Is that something that you can do, or do you feel like you have to be strong in your prayers, have to have some kind of strength to them, some kind of stoicness to them? David cries out. Folks, sometimes leanness, sometimes weakness is what makes you and I lean more fully on God. I've had this friend, and I've known her for years and years, and I've seen her go in the last couple of years through some tremendously difficult things in her life. And I have watched her communication with God change in ways that stirs my heart when I hear her pray. When I hear her speak of God, she speaks of there's this intimacy, this understanding, and she calls on characteristics in his life, and when she prays, there's just this understanding that God is for her. And that's come through leanness. That's come through weakness, and she's accepted that. But as she has grown weaker in her eyes, God has grown stronger. And David cries out to God in times of weakness. That's what he does. But there's a second thing. His eyes then, and this is important, folks, his eyes after he cried out are open to watching what God does. Got this young leader that I drink coffee with occasionally, and he's reading this book called The Holiness of God by A.W. Tozer, and it's thin, but it's thick, if you know what I mean. It's got some depth to it, and he has said several times, I can't rush my way through the book, and you cannot. It's an introduction to just the characteristics of God, and we were talking the other day about how it's changed his life, and he said, you know what, I'm still just kind of wading through it, but he said the one thing that has happened is my eyes have been open to what God is doing around me. I'm seeing God more in nature, and that's just a start. And as we cry out to him and our eyes are open, we have to watch for what he does. David says, I cried out and you answered me. My cry reached your ears. And when we look at 2 Samuel 22, 8 through 16, let me just read a couple of these verses for you. Then the earth quaked and trembled. The foundations of the heavens shook. They quaked because of his anger. Smoke poured from his nostrils. Fierce flames leaped from his mouth. Glowing coals blazed forth from him. He opened the heavens and came down. Dark storm clouds were beneath his feet. Mounted on a mighty angelic being, he flew soaring on the wings of the wind. He shrouds himself in darkness, veiling his approach with dense rain clouds. It goes on and on. You know what I think? I think David was in hot water, and somehow God used a thunderstorm to save his bacon. But you know, here's the difference. Here, I'm not saying every time it rains or doesn't rain on us that God is directly doing that for us, but you know what? Sometimes he just comes through in specific ways. And we're so caught up sometimes in just blaming it on luck or coincidence, or we just don't think about the fact that we ask God to do something, and he is answering, and we'll see it if our eyes are open. Are your eyes open? I had someone between the first and second service just talk about how much she has to key down and turn off the TV and quiet herself so she can see God at work around her. Wow, what wisdom. See, when we miss his movement, folks, we miss the opportunity he gives to build trust. When we miss his movement around us, when we're so busy, when we're so caught up in what's going on right here, we miss the opportunities to see what he's doing for us, and those opportunities are exactly what he uses to create trust. And that's how we grow as children after the heart of God, as that trust, as that track record is built up. What do you do? What do you do when you're weak, when you're overwhelmed, when you're fearful, when you're paralyzed, when you're disappointed, when you're discouraged? What do you do when you're weak? And the second question is simply this: what do you do when you're strong? What do you do when you're strong? I mean, let's just think about it for just a second, okay? I mean, a lot of you felt happy. A lot of you felt peaceful. So we've got a bigger portion of us right now. We're kind of feeling in a good place, right? And what do you do when you've worked and interviewed for that promotion? Doggone, you get it. And you get a little extra salary because of that. What do you do when your kids are just being angelic? Haven't had that moment yet? Still waiting? I don't know what I'll do. What do you do when your marriage is just ticking? It's just almost effortless. I haven't had that moment yet. What do you do? What do you do when things are just like when you're just stacking up the W's? It's just like one thing. It just seems like it's just there. Victory after victory. And even spiritually, you just feel like you're on top of it. Can I confess just something to you real quickly? We've been talking about confessing and revealing. I figured I can get in on that game too. I'd love to feel spiritually strong. I love it. I don't know if you're with me on that, but I love feeling spiritually strong because I do. And I like it because I'm in leadership, and I feel like I'm a better leader when I'm spiritually strong, and when I read the Bible and it just speaks to me. Oh man, there's a great lesson. Thank you, God. And when I worship and I feel His presence, and when I just have days upon days of just obedience, and when my prayers just feel strong and I rise up and I'm like, okay, I got this. I got confidence. I see your vision, God. I love those days. But I also find something happens usually when I begin to stack too many wins up in my life spiritually or relationally or whatever. And that is, as my friend said, after he said, I grew up in a school where I had to be strong. I felt like I had to be strong. I had to be there for everybody else. I always had to have the answer. I was the guy everybody came to for resources. If they were struggling, they came to me. And he said, what I realized out of that school comes this definition or this vocabulary. And the vocabulary is a very simple one. It's one letter. It is I. And he said, Steve, when I realized that I grew up in a school of strong, you have to be strong, that I's begin to dot most of my sentences. My identity became who I was. My identity became what my role was, what my title was. It was about me in so many ways. And there was a lot more I's in my sentence than there were he's or God in my sentence. When we begin to stack the W's, we have to be very careful, as David understood, that we can begin in some ways to begin to get the glory. David says something here that's I almost missed, honestly. I read this a bunch of times. If you're reading along in your Bible app, 2 Samuel 22:28 says this: you rescue the humble, but your eyes watch the proud and humiliate them. It kind of comes before the second act. So let me read the second movement to you, at least part of it. In your strength, I can crush an army. With my God, I can scale a wall. His way is perfect. He is a shield for all who look to him. God is my strong fortress, and he makes my way perfect. Catch this. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer. I don't think I've ever been as sure-footed as a deer. He enables me to stand on mountain heights. He trains my hands for battle. He strengthens my arms to draw a bronze bow. We're talking about some strength there, baby. You have given me your shield of victory. Your help has made me great. You have made a wide path for my feet to keep them from slipping. I chased my enemies and destroyed them. I consumed them. They fell beneath my feet. You have armed me with strength for the battle. Man, that's strength. That's deliverance. That's being on your game. What do you do What do you do when you're strong? Sometimes actually it's easier to go to God when we are weak, when we're broken. But when we're strong, we get feeling like, I can do that. I did that before, I can do that. I worked hard to get that. I made that happen. In a sense, although we probably would never actually hear our lips say it, we are saying, I am responsible for where I am at and what I have. David gives God all the credit in times of strength. He cries out to him in times of weakness, and he gives God intentionally all the credit. Not only you gave me the victory, but the specifics of how the victory came. And I'd like to talk about that more, but I think that's important to think about. So let me just kind of wrap this second movement up by saying this, folks. The path to being after God's own heart means that we give him the credit and that we give him the glory for the strength and the victories that he gives us. So whatever you have, folks, he gave you. And wherever you are, he brought you. And whatever you are, he made you. We need to remember that. When he was weak, he cried out to God. When David was strong, he gave God credit. And let me just say that it wasn't about David for David. That he used where he was at only to frame up and as kind of not a target, but a kind of an arrow, a pointer. He used his life, his weakness and strength only to point people, not to him, but to point people to God. His story was just the frame. It wasn't the actual canvas itself. He says of God, he is worthy of praise. And who is God but the Lord? He's real. He's just real. We can follow his life, the ups and downs, and choose to be vulnerable and choose to cry out to him in times of weakness and choose to make sure that we are giving intentionally him credit for times of strength, whatever that strength might look like, financially or relationally or spiritually or whatever it might be. Make sure that we're giving him the credit. Are we doing that? So let me just share with you, I just want to share a couple things to make this practical, okay? Because I think I want to give you something to take home. One, I would encourage you to highlight when you are reading your scriptures or when you're looking at your app, figure out a way to highlight the things, the specific characteristics of God and those things that God does to show who he is and to keep his promise. Highlight those things because those are things that you can come back to. Second of all, write it down. Write your struggles down. Write your weaknesses down that you're feeling. Write your strengths down. And then keep your eyes open to see how God will hear you and answer your prayers and come through, whether it be the storm or whatever. Tell it. Tell other people what you're going through. Again, not so it's all about you, not so the spotlight's on you, but tell it so you can provide a framework for God being on the canvas for your coworker, for your neighbor, for a relative, for someone you're getting ready to sit at the Thanksgiving dinner with in 7 or 8 weeks, okay? Tell where you're at. Someone says, how you doing? Don't just say, I'm fine. Don't just say, oh, things are really good. Say, hey, take 2 minutes. You don't have to take an hour. Take a couple minutes and go, hey, honestly, man, I'm struggling right now. And then it opens the doors because there's a real moment that somebody can relate to. And when they relate to the real and connect to the real, it opens the door in their heart for you to say, hey, here's some things God's showing me through this. Doesn't always have to be big and glorious. Just some lessons learned. Tell it. Folks out there need us to be real. They need us to be real like David showed himself to be real. They don't need us to have all the answers every time and to always look like that we are happy and peaceful and on top of our game. They need us to be real. They can relate to us in that realness. And then we bring God to that realness so they can see him in real light. Let's be real to people. Last thing I would do, let's not forget that primarily 2 Samuel 22 is a song. It is a song that David wrote of the ups and the downs. It's a song that he sang, and not only he sang it so his people could sing it. And there's something, and I wish I had more time to talk about what songs, the singing of a song does to our heart. But I'm gonna ask us to do something. I'm gonna ask you to, I've given you a couple highlights and take-homes. Now I'm gonna ask us, okay, to just stand. We're gonna sing a song with the band, all right, that you're familiar with, all right? And I just want you to just respond whether you are weak, whether you are happy, whether you are scared, whatever face you put up there. I just want you to sing to God out of that. This is not our decision time, all right? We're gonna have that in just a moment. But I just want us to take a moment, all right? We're gonna stand there, we're gonna start this thing strong. I want you to sing out of your realness, where you're at. Let's stand and sing with the band.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It wasn't my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It wasn't my tomb, yeah, till I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul, and now your freedom is all that I know. Listen, the old and made new. Jesus, when I met you, you called my name. Come on. And I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. All right, here we go. I needed rescue. I needed rescue. My sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter. I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future. My eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, shout it! I ran out of that grave, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Oh, come on. Yeah. Amen. Praise the Lord.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, you can sing that song. You can sing that song in your day of weakness and be absolutely true to your heart for that, okay? You don't have to feel it. Just sing it out of your heart because it's true. You can sing that song on the day of strength, okay? I don't know where you are at this morning. I don't know what you are feeling. I don't know where your heart is. I do know this. I know that when Jesus talks about a way that we come to him, that really what he starts with is this. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The poor in spirit. Jesus says, in order to come to me, you need to recognize that whether you feel weak or whether you feel strong, that I'm not interested in whatever you might bring to me. And so when we are weak, so many of us are waiting till we have some kind of a spiritual moment or wait until we get control of things or the semblance of that before we actually give our heart to the Father. Or if we're strong, we want to bring him our behavior. We want to bring him our service. We want to bring him a gift of some kind. And God says, basically, I'm not interested. I am not interested in what you might put on the desk in front of me so that I might receive you. It is by grace. Don't try to get stronger if you're weak, and don't try to impress me if you're strong. I'm just waiting for you to bring your heart broken and contrite, for you to say, I am not God. David says so often, who is God but the Lord? There are no gods but you. You alone are God. Man, folks, if you've never made that surrender of yourself to him, whether on this particular day, whatever your face looks like, whether you are happy or sad or up or down or depressed or in control or seemingly, he just wants you to come to him with the heart of a child and say, really, I've got nothing. That's what he's waiting for. So this is the decision time right now, actually. That you might say, that's where I'm at. I just need to come forward and bring him nothing except my heart. That's what he wants. So we're going to sing this song. And I just encourage you, I challenge, I call you to come from wherever you're at and to come forward and just say, I'm laying down nothing because that's all I got. And allow him to put his arms around you, rescue you from the grave, give you new life. That's what we're waiting for. Let's sing together. I encourage you right now to make that decision, right?